Hey, CJN podcast listeners, Michael Fraiman here, executive producer. I wanted to share that the CJN has earned 6 Simon Rockhour Awards this month, the Jewish Pulitzers, as some folks call them. We took home awards for magazine writing and design, and for feature stories on a Holocaust music project, BDS on Canadian campuses, and 4 women who discovered they were sisters in their golden years, thanks to 23andMe. But we can't create award-winning journalism without your help. If you value independent Jewish journalism, please consider supporting us today at thecjn.ca/donate.
אנחנו עדים לגל אלימות נוראי שמתבצע בידי אספסוף אנרכיסטי ביהודה ושומרון. מעשים שמטמאים את הבית וחורגים מכל...
Here's the president of Israel voicing his deep concern about the rise in extremist Jewish settler attacks in the West Bank in recent months. Speaking in Hebrew last month, Isaac Herzog said at his official residence during a ceremony to award the annual Jerusalem Unity Prize that a dangerous process of what he called in Hebrew brutalization is creeping into mainstream Israeli society. Herzog also singled out the group of extremist Jewish Israelis in the West Bank who he called, quote, a lawless anarchist mob, and whose ongoing attacks against Palestinians, he says, defiled every moral, legal, and Jewish norm. He also said this extremist Jewish settler violence threatens all Israelis. And he's not alone in criticizing the current situation. Israel's military chief and senior military officers issued similar warnings recently. So did the Israeli defense minister. According to the IDF, fires have been set against Palestinian homes and mosques, and also near Christian sites, including a church and cemetery. Extremists have been accused of destroying orchards, stealing livestock, draining water tanks, and beating and even killing Palestinian civilians. Last year, the Israeli Defense Forces reported 867 such attacks in the West Bank. And while these attacks are usually against Palestinian and Bedouin communities, Israel's security forces are also in the crosshairs. On June 29th of 2025, the extremists turned against their own army. An IDF battalion clashed with a group of settlers who threw stones and beat the soldiers. A few settlers got arrested. Later, the settlers came back and set fire to an IDF base. 3 Palestinians were killed. Canada has been watching the situation and started bringing in sanctions last year. Earlier this month, Ottawa doubled down and joined several European countries in announcing a 5th round of sanctions, which are financial and travel bans now in place on 2 more Israelis and on 5 groups who Canada says are financing and enabling Jewish settler violence. One of the groups is Regavim, which says it's going to sue Canada. Canada and the United Nations regard the West Bank as occupied territory captured by Israel in 1967, and Canada says Israeli settlements there violate international law. But Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs says the West Bank should be considered disputed territory, whose status can only be determined through negotiations with a recognized partner for peace. About 500,000 Israelis now live in 147 West Bank cities and towns and several hundred outpost settlements. Residents say not all the settlers are fanatics who see the area as rightfully belonging to the Jewish state. Israel's prime minister has estimated only about 70 young men are involved, all told, but accurate numbers are hard to find. Questions about the future of the area remain fraught, but for our guests today, watching the violence made it impossible to stay on the sidelines.
Well, we've just been working here in this particular group of families who are Bedouin to provide some protection from this encroaching settler violent land grab. And I'm here because I just felt that I couldn't sit in Montreal anymore and do nothing.
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Friday, June 19th, 2026. Welcome to North Star, the flagship podcast of the Canadian Jewish News, made possible thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Gronowski-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. Ronit Yarosky is a Canadian peace activist. She was raised in Montreal but lived in Israel before coming back for good to attend university. And for over a week this month, she was in the West Bank, where she slept on the floor of a Bedouin shepherding family's home. She was part of a group working with an Israeli organization called Torat Tzedek. It brings volunteers from Israel and around the world to do what they call protective presence work. They embed with Palestinian families in the hope that it might deter extremist attacks. They're told to document everything on their phones, not fight back, and they also call the Israeli police to intervene. Critics like Yarosky say the violent actors are emboldened by policies from within the highest ranks of the Israeli government, which keeps approving expanded settlement construction and retroactively legalizes hilltop outposts. On the other hand, officials have observed that Israel is in a multi-front war, and the IDF says it doesn't have enough capacity to also deal with Jewish violence in the West Bank. Canada opposes more settlements because Ottawa says it interferes with the peace process for a two-state solution. On today's episode, Yarosky joins me along with Maytal Kowalski in Vancouver. She's executive director at JSpace Canada, and she's done protective presence work herself not long ago. Both will explain why they believe the rise in Jewish violence in the West Bank should be a central focus for Canadian Jews. Welcome to the CJN's North Star podcast.
Thank you so much for having us, and thank you for covering this.
Right on the front lines, Ronit, can you tell us where you are and why you're there?
So I'm right outside of a town called Taybeh. It's not far from the Ramallah area.
So is this your first experience doing this kind of work?
It's my first experience doing this kind of work. I've done similar stuff, but not for a very, very long time, a couple of decades.
Can you describe what happened to you? Just give us an example of sort of what you've encountered and what you've seen.
So today was a really quiet day, actually. Not quiet for the Palestinians and the Bedouin, but anywhere that we went, the settlers had already left. But yesterday, I can explain a little bit what the day was like. It was not easy, really not easy. There are so many new outposts. Like, I just was shocked driving here. I haven't driven here in such a long time in the West Bank. It's like on every hilltop, there's a new outpost, a new outpost, a new outpost. And they are sending out these often kids as young, it seems like 7 years old, with these herds of sheep, goats, camels, and they come from their outposts and they come onto the land that doesn't belong to them. And in particular, they're coming right up to the fenced areas of these families who we are providing protection, and all the others everywhere else. The intention is to gain access. So it's a lot of intimidation, cutting the fences, trying to break into the houses. And in fact, these fences here, it's a bit of a fiction, because if they wanted to get through them, they could get through them. But it's like this ongoing intimidation all day long, day after day after day after day. They're aggressive. It's kind of hard to believe. You know, we know, like, we hear about it, you read about it, but it's just kind of hard to believe what's happened. And nothing really has happened to me in the stories that I'm hearing from other activists. The level of violence being committed by Jewish Israelis it's just blowing my mind. It's unthinkable. It's unthinkable.
Ronit sent us a video of herself being, I would say the word is intimidated, confronted, blocked by a very tall, thin young man wearing black. And I would like to ask you to describe that.
So this was at a moment where we just didn't have enough bodies here. There were 3 settlers around this compound, I suppose. 2 had brought their herds to the gate and just parked their herd in front of the gate for hours. So, like, no one could come in and no one could get out of the compound. And it was myself, like, I'm 4'10", you know, and someone else who has ties to Montreal, who were called to, like, go run to the neighbor. And there's no way to get to the neighbor except through the front gate, but we couldn't do that. So we somehow found a hole in the fence and to climb down this, like, 2-meter wall and got over there. He had lifted off this double gate to gain access to, or to try and gain access to these houses. And he was going around and, like, rattling and, like, pounding on things, just intimidating. If he wanted to get in, he would get in. The men weren't home. These women and children were there by themselves. One is a fairly large house with a fairly good gate. And the other is a tin shack. We slept there the night before. It was a tin shack. When we got down there, we couldn't see the settler. And the woman in this shack opened the door at the crack, and I could see, like, her face, and she was pointing. Like, this is an image that's going to be seared in my brain forever. It's like this terror. And we are there to film, to document what's happening. And they are also documenting us, the settlers. And so he's just walking around with his camera, coming right up, right in our face, circling around us. And I was on the phone trying to call police and like just having all that difficulty. And there was also a hill, so I'm very short. He's very tall. I was on the downside of the hill, and it looks like this giant towering over me. And I wasn't particularly scared, but it's not pleasant. And I just thinking, never mind me. What's going to happen when he gains access, when someone like that gains access to that house? One
And
of the things is that the really instructed you don't fight back. I mean, obviously, if there's like some crazy case of aggression, yes, but they're provoking, they're waiting for a reaction so they can then say, we did this, we attacked them, and we attack them. Then the army comes in, declares a closed military zone. The activists all have to leave, and that's the end of it. That's the land grab. That's when it starts. And I just been hearing story after story after story after story after story of the same thing over and over and over and over and over again.
I'm going to bring Maytal in because we've been watching an escalation when we've been reading in the news. Where are we at in terms of the progression since October 7th?
Sure. Yeah. So I think, one of the things that's really important to understand is it has escalated since October 7th, and that escalation is not only, rogue settlers or quote unquote a few bad apples. This is state sponsored. This is not a bug. And so what we are seeing and the impunity that Ronit is noting and what she is seeing, I myself, even hearing from her, it's staggering because the last time I was there was last year, not even a year ago, last summer. So, it just goes to show that this is really accelerating. The only way we have to understand that the only way for something like this to accelerate at the pace that it is because there is some impunity from the state and from governing bodies that allow it to escalate in this way. And, to bring in, I think, a little bit more of the policy angle to this, I would say two things. The first is that where Ronit is actually a very interesting area. If I'm not mistaken, Taybeh is, first of all, it is very close to Ramallah. Ramallah is Area A. Traditionally, Ramallah remained, I wouldn't say safe, but a lot safer because Area A is under exclusive jurisdiction of the Palestinian Authority. Area B is split between the Palestinian Authority for like civil matters, education, etc., health, but is under Israeli control. Area C remains completely under Israeli control. That is the vast majority of the West Bank. That's about 60%. This is according to the Oslo Accords, which are still in effect. What we are seeing now is when you hear of settlers going into, when Ronit just said that, I'm like Googling it because I'm like, wait, that can't be. Like, are we getting this close to Ramallah? But she's exactly right. And this is what we're reading about. More outposts being built closer and closer to Area A. This is all strategic. This is all backed by the state. This all exists to bisect the West Bank so that a Palestinian state will not be viable in the future. And this is not some conspiracy. This is what folks like Bezalel Smotrich are not only saying, but have written in their policy plan since 2017 and have gained access not only to government, but to governing over the West Bank in order to be able to actually implement this plan. This is something that the state should be stopping. The fact that it is not shows that this is their strategy. The second thing that I would say too is that it's really important for folks to understand that the IDF and like the Shabak, they are actually in coordination with the Palestinian Authority trying to stop this because they actually do recognize that this is a security threat for Israel. Even if you don't care about the Palestinians at all, it is actually at the state level. It is the government of Benjamin Netanyahu that stops any sort of attempt to curb this.
Let's bring in Ronit. Did you get anywhere with the law enforcement people? You said you phoned somebody.
So, yeah, what Maytal is saying has not been my experience. So my experience this time, I have not had any interaction with the IDF. I have not heard one story that would back up or any kind of.
Sorry, let me clarify. IDF soldiers on the ground, no. I'm talking about when you see the IDF chief of staff saying settler violence is becoming an issue. I agree. I'm not trying to defend what the IDF is doing on the ground. I'm saying from like a security analysis perspective at the highest levels.
It should be taken that way because it's just like I'm just seeing Israel self-destruct before my eyes. We tried to call the police. We were told when you call the police, you have 2 seconds, literally 2 seconds. You tell them where you are and you get the case number. And that's the time that you have. I was fortunate. I had somehow a very sympathetic policewoman who answered the phone. And I was unable to send her my location for whatever reason. I just couldn't. And she actually called me back 3 times to try and help. But we called them 3 times yesterday because we were locked in here for hours. We had this crazy guy trying to get into the house and they never showed up. And in the end, the settlers left and we made a decision to call them and cancel because when they do that, they wait until, they probably all left and they come and they get angry. And who are the police officers? They're the settlers. And often the soldiers, who are they? They're the settlers. And they're all like working in cahoots to enforce this, being extremely violent at times, extremely like killing people for nothing.
The IDF chief said that it was a security threat to Israel, which I would like to ask you that question, that when you get these events and these settler attacks, people fight back eventually. Right now they don't because it's quiet, but are you seeing evidence of the boiling point?
I haven't been here long enough to see any evidence of a boiling point. What I can say that I've seen is people being unbelievably welcoming to the activists. I met with a gentleman a few days ago. We were speaking, I was in his house. It was a birthday party for his daughter. And my Arabic is very limited. And he spoke Hebrew. So I was speaking with him in Hebrew and I said, "Where's your Hebrew from?" And he says, "I was in Israeli jail for 25 years. And like, I don't know how to look at someone like that. Like, what am I supposed to say to that man? And he and everyone else I've spoken to, all displaced. That man who told me about the jail for 25 years, he was sitting in the house of his daughter, whose house up the road had been demolished shortly before. They all say the same thing. The only way forward is through peace. Now, what is peace? A solution. Everyone has said that. Now, I'm not saying everybody thinks that, but this is what I've been hearing over and over. We drive through Taybeh, driven through the other towns. We wave and everybody is helpful and appreciative. People just want to get on with their lives and they're being displaced from their land. They're losing everything. Everything is being taken. And right now I feel we're just buying time. We're just buying time. I'm sitting here buying time. I'm buying another day for this family.
When you say you sleep there, what is the reasoning behind thinking that it would be a good idea for having Westerners to document and literally sleep on the floor?
It's not only Westerners, it's a lot of Israelis too. I'd like to say not anywhere near enough of anyone. Because people have to be here 24 hours a day because they come in the day, they come in the night, and there has to be that presence here all the time. So there's 3 families here that right nearby, sort of in this little cluster, and there's often enough activists. There always has to be at least 2. So last night we were 2, and it was a big problem. Where do we stay? Whose house are we going to stay at? Because if we're at this one's house, this one is unprotected. If we're at that one's house, the other one is unprotected.
But the idea is what? That they wouldn't attack if they knew there was an Israeli or a Western person there? Is that kind of the thinking behind it?
Again, I think when they're ready to attack, it doesn't matter how many Israelis you're going to have here. It doesn't matter how many fences you're going to have. They're going to attack if and when they want. What the presence is doing is more documenting. It is a deterrence, but it's not going to be a deterrence when they make the decision. That guy you saw in that video, he could have toppled me over pretty easily.
Did you talk to him? Did he say anything to you?
No, he doesn't talk. And that's one thing, like, we're also supposed to speak as little as possible because then it's used against us. I was having this conversation with this one kid, 8 years old maybe, and he was sitting right opposite me, on one side of the fence and me on the inside of the fence. And there was a hole in the fence that had been cut, and he kept putting his foot through it. And I don't remember what I said, but he said, are you accusing me of cutting that hole? And someone might have said yes. And that's not good because that could lead to all kinds of, problems, lawsuits. Try and keep the interaction to a minimum. I did say to that guy, get away from me, stop pushing me, or stop pushing the other person I was with. He was touching me. He was.
Oh, he was.
I mean, not with his arm, but he was like so close to me, he was touching me.
Breathing on you. And in terms of the timing of where you're there, and I'm sure you also noticed the news, or maybe you haven't seen it, but Canada today issued 2 government statements. One was sanctions on some new settlers and on Regavim and 2 other hilltop entities. Have you guys seen that?
Yeah.
Ronit, do people hear about this, and what do they know about Canada and our position?
I can't answer that question 100% accurately. I'd have to say I don't know. But like to me, when you're saying that, and I'm sitting here, one hand I'm like saying, "Great, Canada has to do that." On the other hand, I'm saying, "So what?" You know, we don't need like people here don't need statements. They need action, and they need this government, this Israeli government, to go, or something has to happen where someone has to take control of the situation.
Coming up, why Canada imposed more sanctions and why JSpace Canada says good. And Maytal, when you saw today's news about more sanctions, does it do any good?
Yeah. So, okay, the first thing I want to say really quickly, I want to clarify when I say that that this is a security threat to Israel as well. It's not only because of fear of like a third intifada or a Palestinian uprising. It's that a disproportionate amount of Israel's security forces and IDF are positioned in the West Bank. So managing or strategically deepening an occupation is a security risk for all other areas of Israel. So, I'm not trying to insinuate that like it's going to get so bad that Palestinians are just going to become violent because of some like I'm not trying to like have some sort of racist stereotype here about what it is. I'm saying like really brass tacks on the ground. So I just want to make that really clear. In terms of the sanctions, look, here's what the sanctions do. It is true that, frozen assets by Canada don't do a heck of a lot on the ground in terms of what Ronit is experiencing on the day-to-day. Where sanctions are very important is that it constructively polarizes Israeli society. It makes Israelis have to choose between if their banking institutions, financial institutions, their businesses, if they are going to invest in the West Bank or in Israel. We want to have a situation where a polarization is created between Israel within the Green Line and settlements and Israeli settlers, where Israelis look at what is happening with the settlers and therefore what is happening to the country, to their financial institutions, to their businesses, and say, wait a second, why are our tax dollars going towards this? Why is my fee for my bus fare going up every year and buses to a settlement from Jerusalem are subsidized? So that's really the main thing that sanctions, especially from middle powers like Canada and their allies, that is the main thing that that they will do. The other thing that they will do that I think is really important to note is that they kind of shift that Overton window of what we can talk about and why we can talk about it. We know that likely under this US administration, under Donald Trump, we are not going to see further sanctions. In fact, sanctions were reversed. But it creates a dialogue and a normalization of, hey, by the way, settlement expansion and deepening an entrenched illegal occupation that is not temporary and is not only military is a problem, and we need to speak out about it.
Taybeh, if I'm saying it right, it's a very famous community. It had a microbrewery at one point. I don't know if that's still there. It's really close to Jerusalem also. It's about 15 kilometers from Jerusalem, northeast of Jerusalem. Does it look that there's places for sheep to graze in a community like this? Or is it all like industrial? And where is the grass is what I want to know.
So the Taybeh, yes, is quite a large town. And I'm on the outskirts of Taybeh, so it would take, a few minutes to get there, like not far. Like, I mean, I don't know if you can see if I turn my camera. It's like open area, and there's a road over there, and there's more open area on the other side. So there is a lot of land for grazing for sure. But you mentioned Taybeh, industrial. So we were called to a cement factory in Taybeh, and I'm thinking, what's going on at a cement factory? Well, the settlers have come there every day and harass I don't know if he was the owner or the manager. And if you can think of a cement factory, what is it? It's a lot of dust, and it's just a lot of rocks, and they bring their sheep just because to have a presence. There's nothing for them to graze on there. And then the settlers come back and scream at them stop touching, but don't touch my shepherds, don't touch my shepherds, and like I'm gonna come back for you. Harassment all the time, all the time.
The only other thing that I would say about sanctions is that's something that JSpace Canada has been calling for. I think this is the fifth round of sanctions. We have been calling for them every time beforehand. I was actually just in Ottawa last week having discussions around sanctions. But this is not something that I necessarily celebrate. If you were to ask me what I want to see as the next round of sanctions, I would say I don't want to see a next round of sanctions. I want to see Israel take concrete steps to end the occupation and deal with these issues on their own as they are able to do. You cannot argue that you are strong enough to fight a multi-front war and also argue that you are not able to stop settler violence in the small area that is the West Bank and the areas in which it is concentrated. So the reality is Canada and its allies are doing these things because Israel is not acting. The statement says, though, if Israel doesn't, take steps to reverse this, stop settlement expansion, and get back to a path of diplomacy and working towards a two-state solution. So Canada and its allies are actually giving Israel ample opportunities, more opportunities than probably we've seen from other countries that are under Canadian sanctions, to reverse course themselves. That is what we should all first and foremost hope for, but we should also recognize that should Israel and the Israeli government not do that, we should not take it as a surprise that Canada and its allies will continue down this path.
Do you think the Canadian diaspora Jews understand, like, there's sort of two things going on? There's the West Bank thing is over here, and we don't really talk about it too much. And then there's all the anti-Semitism in Canada. And I'm wondering where you hold these two things.
I think the first thing is, look, anti-Semitism is real. We actually just a couple months ago did an event at that shul at Temple Emmanuel Beth Shalom in Montreal. So much love and support to Rabbi Grushko over there and their incredible security team. So saddened by that news. And that was, in fact, one of two incidents in 24 hours of anti-Semitic attacks in Canada. This is a real issue. It is also a real issue that Israeli Jews are acting in our name in the West Bank, taking on these violent actions and doing the things that Ronit is sharing with us that she is witnessing and she is seeing and she is pushing back on. If Israeli Jewish settlers want to say that they are doing this for the security and safety of all Jews, because Kol Bnei Israel Aravim Ze B'Ze, all of the land of Israel, all of the people of Israel are responsible for one another, then they should recognize, and the Israeli government and those who support these actions should recognize that it affects Jews in the diaspora. On the second side, though, I would say from those who want to protest these actions and protest what is happening, especially from outside of the Jewish community, the best gift that you can give the Israeli right and that you can give the settlers is to engage in anti-Semitism and to conflate what is happening in Israel with Canadian Jews. I think that as soon as protesters do that, and it happens far too much, it is a gift to these settlers. It is a gift to the Israeli right, because they can just say, look, no matter what we do, there's always going to be these anti-Semites. They're always going to conflate Jews with Israel. So who cares? We're just going to do it anyways. So there is, I think that in our protest, in our resistance, and in our call for diplomacy, peace, and a path to a solution, we need to all be a lot more judicious and strategic in how we are approaching it, because this is not to win for your side to win on a slogan. This is for us to get to peace and diplomacy and peace for Israelis and Palestinians in the region, which I think is what the vast majority of us want.
I think that there are too many people who don't want to know, I wish I didn't know. Ignorance would be so much nicer. I'd live in bliss. To me, like that's the center of the problem. People don't want to know, and you don't criticize Israel. And so this is what happens. And I'm not sure that these settlers, anyways, they're not doing it for the security of anyone. I don't think they don't care. They're doing it because it's God, their God-given right, and they will do it by any means possible. People don't want to know, and we're just giving them a pass. We have to shake things up a little bit, because I don't know how much diplomacy is working. These people don't have time for diplomacy. Any moment, the army can come in here, say this is a closed military zone, and these three families are homeless, and they've got to go find somewhere else to live, in spite of the fact that they've been living here and their families have been living here for so many generations. How are we doing that? In the name of who is that being done? And we're just letting that happen.
Thanks for joining me on the CJN's North Star podcast. And that's what Jewish Canada sounded like for this episode of North Star, made possible thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. The show was produced by Zachary Kauffman with Izzie Helenchilde. Michael Fraiman is our executive producer, and Alicia Richler is the CJN's editorial director. We welcome your comments. Write to us at info@thecjn.ca. And don't forget to check out our YouTube channel for all our documentaries and interviews. Thanks for listening.